Men of Iron, Chapter 20. So for a little while Miles was disposed to congratulate himself upon having come off so well from his adventure with the Earl. But after a day or two had passed, and he had had time for second thought, he began to doubt whether, after all, he might not have carried it with a better air if he had shown more chivalrous boldness in the presence of his true lady, whether it would not have redounded more to his credit if he had in some way asserted his rights as the young lady's knight-errant and defender. Was it not ignominious to resign his rights and privileges so easily and tamely at a signal from the Earl? For in truth, said he to Guskin, as the two talked the matter over, she has, in a certain way, accepted me for her knight, and yet I stood there without saying so much as one single word in her behalf. Nay, said Guskin, I would not be troubled on that score. I think that ye did come off wondrously well out of that business. I would not have thought it possible that my lord would have been so patient with you as he showed himself. He must hold you in some high esteem. Truly, said Miles, after a pause of meditative silence, I know not of any esteem, yet I do think he was passing patient with me in this matter. But nevertheless, Francis, that does not change my stand. Yea, I did shamefully, so to resign my lady without speaking one word. Nor will I so resign her even yet. I have thought much of this matter of late, Francis, and now I come to you to help me. I would have ye act the part of a true friend to me, like the one I have told you of in the story of Emperor Justinian. I would have ye, we next ye serve in the house, so too contrive that my Lady Alice shall get a letter which I shall presently write, and wherein I may set all that is crooked straight again. Heaven forbid, said Guskin hastily, that I should be such a fool as to burn my fingers in drawing your chestnuts from a fire. Deliver the letter yourself, good fellow. So spoke Guskin, and yet after all had ended, as it usually did, he yielded to Miles' superior will. So the letter was written, and one day the good-natured Guskin carried it with him to the house, and the opportunity offering gave it to one of the young ladies attendant upon the Countess's family, a lass with whom he was friendly, to be delivered to the Lady Alice. But if Miles congratulated himself upon the success of this adventure, it was not for long. That night, as the crowd of pages and squires were making themselves ready for bed, the call came through the uproar for Miles Falworth. Here am I, cried Miles, standing up on his cot. Who calls me? It was the groom of the Earl's bedchamber. Seeing Miles standing thus raised above the others, he came walking down the length of the room toward him, the wonted hubbub gradually subsiding as he advanced, and the youngsters turning, staring, and wondering. My lord would speak with you, Miles Falworth, said the groom, when he had come close enough to where Miles stood. Ay, and make ready. He is at livery even now. The groom's words fell upon Miles like a blow. He stood for a while staring, quite wide-eyed. My lord, speak with me? He ejaculated at last. Aye, said the other impatiently. Get you ready quickly, for I must return. Miles' head was in a whirl as he hastily changed his clothes for a better suit, Guskin helping him. What could the Earl want with him at this hour? But he knew in his heart what it was. The interview would concern nothing but the letter that he had sent to Lady Alice that day. As he followed the groom through the now dark and silent courts, and across the corner of the great quadrangle, and so to the Earl's own home, he tried to brace his failing courage to meet the coming interview. Nevertheless, his heart beat tremulously as he followed the other, down the long corridor, lit only by a flaring torch set in a wrought-iron bracket. Then his conductor lifted the hanging at the door of the bedchamber, whence came the murmuring sound of many voices, and holding it aside beckoned him to enter. Miles passed within. At first he was conscious of nothing but a crowd of people, and of the brightness of many lighted candles. Then he saw that he stood in a great airy room, spread with a mat of woven rushes. On three sides the wall were hung with tapestry representing hunting and battle scenes. At the farther end where the bed stood, the stone wall of the fourth side was covered with a cloth of blue, embroidered with silver goshawks. Even now, in the warm springtime of May, the room was still chilly, and a great fire roared and crackled in the huge gaping mouth of the stone fireplace. Not far from the blaze were clustered the greater part of those present, buzzing in talk, now and then swelled by a murmuring laughter. Some of those who knew Miles nodded to him, and two or three spoke to him as he stood waiting, while the groom went forward to speak to the Earl. Though what they said and what he answered, Miles in his bewilderment and fear hardly knew. As was said before, the livery was the last meal of the day, and was taken in bed. It was a simple repast, a small loaf of bread of pure white flour, a loaf of household bread, sometimes a lump of cheese, and either a great flagon of ale or of sweet wine, warm and spiced. The Earl was sitting upright in bed, dressed in a furred dressing gown, and propped up by two cylindrical bolsters of crimson satin. Upon the coverlet and spread over his knees was a large white napkin of linen fringed with silver thread, and on it rested a silver tray containing the bread and some cheese. 2 pages and 3 gentlemen were waiting upon him, and the mad Noel, the jester, stood at the head of the bed, now and then jingling his bauble and passing some quaint jest on the chance of making his master smile. On a table nearby were some dozen or so wax tapers, stuck in as many spiked candlesticks of silver gilt, and illuminating the end of the room with their bright twinkling flame. One of the gentlemen was in the act of serving the Earl with a goblet of wine, poured from a silver urn by one of the squires, as the groom of the chamber came forward and spoke. The Earl, taking the goblet, turned his head, and as Miles looked, their eyes met. Then the Earl turned away again and raised the cup to his lips, while Miles felt his heart beat more rapidly than ever. But alas, the meal had ended, and the Earl washed his hands and his mouth and his beard from a silver basin of scented water held by one of the squires. Then, leaning back against the pillow, beckoned to Miles. In answer, Miles walked forward the length of the room, conscious that all eyes were fixated upon him. The Earl said something, and then those who stood near drew back as Miles came forward. Then Miles found himself standing beside the bed, looking down upon the quilted counterpane, feeling that the other was gazing fixedly upon him. "I sent for you," said the Earl at last, still looking steadily at him, "because this afternoon there came a letter to my hand, which she had written to my niece, the Lady Alice." "I have it here," said he, thrusting his hand under the bolster, "and have just now finished reading it." Then, after a moment's pause, while he opened the parchment and scanned it again, "I find no matter of harm in it, but hereafter write no more such." He spoke entirely without anger, and Miles looked up in wonder. "Here, take it," said the Earl, folding the letter and tossing it to Miles, who instinctively caught it. "And henceforth trouble ye my niece no more, either by letter or by any other way. I thought you would be at some saucy trick, and I made Alice promise to let me know if that happened. Now I say, let this be an end of this matter. Do ye not know you may injure her by such witless folly as that of meeting her in privy, and privy writing to her?" "I meant no harm," said Miles. "Oh, I believe you," said the Earl. "That will do now. You may go." Miles hesitated. "Oh? What more would ye say?" said Lord Falworth. "Only this," said Lord Mackworth. "Only this," said Miles, "if I have your leave so to do, that the Lady Alice has chosen me to be her knight, and so, whether I may see her or speak with her or no, the law of chivalry give me, who am gentle-born, the right to serve her as a true knight may." "As a true fool may," said the Earl dryly. "Why, you're not even a knight. You're not nothing but a raw lump of a boy. You have no right to the law of chivalry. What right do you have? You are a fool." Had the Earl been angry, his words would have been less bitter to Miles than this cool, unmoved patience. It mortified his pride and galled it to the quick. "I know that you do hold me in contempt," he mumbled. "Out upon you," said the Earl testily. "You do tease me beyond patience. I hold you In contempt? Forsooth, why look you, had ye been anyone other than ye, I would have had ye whipped out of my house long since from thine antics. Think ye I would have borne so patiently with another one of the squires, had such one held secret meeting with my daughter and niece? And tampered, as ye've done again with my household, sending through one of my people that letter? You are a grand fool, Miles Falworth. Miles stood staring at the Earl without making any effort to speak. The words that he had heard suddenly flashed, as it were, a new light into his mind. In that flash, he fully recognized, and for the first time, the strange and quite wonderful forbearance that this great Earl had shown to him, a poor obscure boy. What did it mean? Was Lord Mackworth his secret friend after all, as Guskin had more than once asserted to him? Sir Miles stood silent, thinking many things. Meantime, the other lay back upon the cylindrical bolsters, looking thoughtfully at him. How old are ye? Said he at last. 17. Last April, answered Miles. Then you are old enough to begin to have some of the thoughts of a man, and to lay aside all of those of a boy. Perhaps ye have had foolish things in your head this short time past, but it is time that ye put them away. Hark ye, sirrah, the Lady Alice is the great heiress in her own right, and may command the best alliance in England, an earl, a duke. She grows apace to a woman, and then her kind will be found in courts and great houses. As for you, you are a poor lad. You are penniless, and without the friends to aid you to open any advancement. Your father is attainted, and one whisper of where he lies hid would bring him thence to the tower, and perhaps even to the block. Besides that, he has an enemy, Sir James Lee, as already told you, an enemy perhaps more great and even more powerful than myself. That enemy watches for your father, and he watches for you. Should ye dare even raise your head or your fortune ever so little, he would crop them both, and that exceedingly quickly. Miles Falworth, how do ye dare to lift your eye to that of the Lady Alice de Mowbray? Poor Miles stood silent and motionless. Sir, said he at last in a dry, choking voice, you're right. I am a fool. Sir, I will never raise my eye to look upon the Lady Alice more. Oh, I say not that either, boy, said the Earl, but before ye do so dare, ye must first place yourself and your family where they fell. Till then, as you are an honest man, do not trouble her. Now get thee hence. As Miles crossed the dark and silent courtyard, and looked up at the clear, still twinkle of the stairs, he felt a kind of dull sense of wonder that they and the night and the world should seem so much the same, and he be now so different. The first stroke he had been given, that was to break in pieces his boyhood life. The second stroke was soon to follow.